Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are wrestling with a question that I think plagues pretty much every single person who considers themselves a film fan. What is that universally acclaimed, must-see classic that sits on your shelf or maybe on your watch list, just completely untouched?
Yeah, it's the cinephile's great unspoken shame, isn't it? And we're not talking about, obscure B-movies here. We mean the titans.
Exactly.
The films that consistently top the AFI, BFI, IMDb lists, the ones everyone quotes, everyone references.
And insists you absolutely must see.
Right.
Absolutely. So our deep dive today is fueled by this really interesting source from an author named John McArthur. He shared his very honest and often quite funny personal hall of shame, unseen classics.
And his reason for writing it was actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah, he basically wanted to force himself, to finally watch these movies. And what's really compelling is that a lot of these are films he already owns.
Right. So the mission for us today isn't just about reading his list. It's more about analyzing the psychology behind it.
Why don't we watch them?
Exactly. McArthur admits he's an equal opportunities ignorer of classic films. So this isn't really about genre bias necessarily. It's about identifying those mental barriers, maybe emotional ones too, that keep these celebrated masterpieces stuck in cinematic purgatory.
Just waiting for that perfect moment that never seems to come.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Maybe we start with the most obvious barrier, the one that feels, I guess, the most powerful. Physical commitment.
Runtime fatigue.
Yeah, the tyranny of the epic problem, as we're calling it.
It's probably the easiest excuse to make, right? Oh, it's too long. But I think it often masks maybe a deeper psychological reluctance.
Okay, so like what?
Well, look at films like Gone with the Wind from 1939. The instant barrier, obviously, is that 4-hour runtime.
4 hours.
Yeah, that requires planning, that needs snacks. That's basically a whole afternoon gone.
McArthur mentioned the subject matter, too. A romance set during the American Civil War wasn't an immediate grab for him, but the length was the first hurdle.
But here's the kicker, the real irony that tells you a lot about this avoidance thing.
What's that?
He actually knows a ton about the film's production. He watched the Scarlett O'Hara War.
Oh, the 1980 TV movie about casting Vivien Leigh.
Exactly. He found that film really entertaining, insightful about 1930s Hollywood. So he basically consumed the meta-narrative, the story around the film, before the film itself.
He watched the making of documentary, essentially, before watching the actual movie. Well, that's incredibly relatable, isn't it? You prioritize the digestible context over the massive feature.
It makes sense in a weird way, though look, the good news is his list seems to be working. He said he's since watched about 90 minutes of Gone with the Wind and actually enjoyed it.
Progress. Maybe he'll conquer that one soon.
Maybe. Then you've got another really long one on his list. Dr. Zhivago, 1965.
Another epic.
Yep, length is key again. But he also noted he'd seen bits, fragments. He'd even seen the ending, just never the whole thing straight through.
Right.
And for him, the barrier was compounded because the story itself, this epic love story against the backdrop of the Russian Revolution, it just didn't have enough pull to make him commit to those 3+ hours.
Okay, and my favorite example of this commitment anxiety has got to be Dances with Wolves, 1990. The 3-disc special edition DVD is specifically mentioned as sitting in my line of sight, never having been bothered by human hands. That's just the perfect image of film fans' aspiration clashing with reality.
It's hilarious because it's so true. We all do it. We buy the definitive edition, with all the special features, the director's cut.
Screaming, I am a serious film viewer.
Exactly. And then it just sits there, maybe even still shrink-wrapped, because suddenly the commitment feels, overwhelming.
But I have to challenge this runtime fear a little bit. If McArthur is an avid film watcher, like he says he is, why does a 3-hour classic like Dances with Wolves scare him off, but then his longer list includes, the entire Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street franchises?
That's a great point.
I mean, the collective hours there are way more demanding. Is the length fear kind of selective?
I think that's a brilliant distinction. Yeah, I think the fear is often tied to the perceived density of the commitment.
Density.
Yeah, watching slasher films, you can dip in and out, it's easily fragmented, it requires kind of a low cognitive load, right?
Sure.
But watching a 3-hour Kevin Costner epic, that implies seriousness, high emotional stakes, a need for uninterrupted attention. It's not just the clock ticking, it's the feeling that you have to dedicate this significant chunk of your day to something culturally significant maybe even challenging.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just time, it's mental energy.
Okay.
Okay, so moving beyond just the physical time commitment, let's talk about the cognitive and emotional side. This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
When overwhelming praise or like massive emotional hype actually pushes you away.
This is anticipation anxiety cranked up to 11. The recommendation itself becomes this kind of pressure, guaranteeing an emotional experience that maybe you're not ready for, or maybe you just don't want.
Right. The prime example he gives is Schindler's List from '93. His main reason for skipping it was a colleague telling him to expect to come out of the cinema in tears.
That phrase right there, expect to come out in tears, that just changes everything. It shifts viewing from discovery to like an emotional duty.
Yeah.
And the really deep insight here is his preference for getting this history through documentaries. He mentions the World at War series.
Okay, why does that difference matter? Why prefer a documentary over the drama?
Well, think about it. When you watch something factual like World at War, you're consuming history as fact. Often there's narration, dates, expert context. You're learning.
Right, it's informational.
Exactly. But when you watch a fiction film like Schindler's List, you're getting curated, dramatic, mediated trauma. You're sort of being guided, maybe even forced, to empathize with specific characters in these incredibly painful situations. Ah, okay.
McArthur seems to prefer the, let's say, intellectual processing of the tragedy over the guided emotional processing. The guaranteed difficulty becomes the deterrent.
That's fascinating. So the expectation of trauma is a barrier totally separate from just the subject matter itself.
Precisely.
And we see a similar thing, though maybe less intense, with the anxiety around Blair Witch Project from '99.
Absolutely. In that case, the promised emotion wasn't tragedy, it was terror.
Soil yourself with fright.
Yeah, that aggressive advertising campaign suggesting you'd, well, yeah, soil yourself with fright. It immediately set the film up to potentially fail. If the hype guarantees this extreme physical reaction...
You start thinking, well, what if I don't freak out? Does that mean the film failed? Or did I fail?
Exactly, that fear of disappointment. Oh. And that anxiety then connects directly to his deeper issue with the whole found footage genre.
Right, he doesn't like it.
He finds the format itself disruptive. He argues that when it's done badly, it just breaks that essential suspension of disbelief. Like, why are they still filming when they're running for their life?
That's exactly the example he gives. The moment you start wondering why the terrified character is prioritizing camera work over, survival, the immersion is just gone. The format itself makes the emotional commitment feel kind of risky, fragile.
Okay, and then we get to a more internal hurdle with Mean Streets, 1973. This one he calls his biggest oversight, which is significant given how much he admires Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, this is different. The barrier here isn't external hype, it's internal. Self-imposed expectation.
How so?
He's hesitant because he's afraid of being disappointed. Specifically, he worries that the raw, improvised nature of some of the scenes may detract from my appreciation of Scorsese and De Niro's early work.
Wow. So he's putting it off because he loves Scorsese so much that he wants to preserve this, idealized image of that early collaboration.
Pretty much.
Rather than risk seeing a potentially less polished reality that might somehow diminish his overall appreciation for the filmmaker. He's basically protecting his own fandom.
Precisely. The avoidance becomes a way of preserving the potential perfection of the film in his mind. The theoretical Mean Streets is safer, maybe even better, than the actual Mean Streets might turn out to be.
Okay, let's pivot now. What about the films that suffer from just being everywhere? Cultural ubiquity.
Ah, yeah.
We're talking about movies where the quotes, the memes, maybe the supporting lore have kind of satisfied the cultural requirement to know the film, making actually watching it feel almost redundant.
This is the phenomenon of cultural osmosis, right? You just absorb the narrative, the tone, simply by existing in the culture. And With Nail and I from 1987 is the absolute definition of this.
He calls it the very definition of cult classic.
Yeah.
It's endless quotes everyone recognizes, inspires drinking games.
Oh, that's gold.
He owns the special edition DVD, naturally. But he admits that when it comes time to pick something to watch, there's always a more attractive option.
And the irony is the quotes themselves provide the social currency without requiring the narrative commitment. You can join in the conversation about With Nail and I, you can use the lines without ever needing to sit through the actual film. The shared appreciation for the dialogue kind of replaces the need for the private viewing of the plot.
That takes us to a really unique case of this fragmented viewing and cultural replacement. Apocalypse Now, 1979.
Oh, this is a spectacular admission. McArthur says he's seen most of it, but never all at once.
How does that even happen?
Well, he saw the first hour, then stopped. Months later, he accidentally caught the last hour on TV. His description: Marlon Brando mumbling in the dark, wearing pajamas.
So he's seen the setup, he's seen the totally bizarre conclusion, but he's missed the whole insane psychedelic journey in the middle.
Exactly. And just like with Gone with the Wind, the meta-narrative, the story about the movie, seems to have taken over.
He mentions the documentary Hearts of Darkness, the one about the incredibly troubled shoot.
Yes. From 1991, he calls it an absolute cracker. And you can see why. The real-life drama, the madness, the typhoons, the heart attacks, Coppola nearly going bankrupt, it's often far more compelling, honestly, than the fictional drama it produced.
The lore around the creation became the main event. It sort of suggests that sometimes the history of the film satisfies our appetite for the epic or the madness better than the finished product actually can.
And if you connect this back to the barriers, the film exists in too many forms now, doesn't it? There's the original cut, the redux, the final cut, all this famous lore, the documentary. Deciding which version to commit 4 hours to and when just becomes paralyzing.
That makes sense. Okay, finally, let's look at the category of maybe duty viewing.
Cinematic homework.
Yeah, exactly. These are the films that somehow slip through the net, even though the author is generally interested in the director or the genre. It forces him to admit there's a gap in his, cinematic education.
And the standout example here is Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon from 1950.
Now, this isn't a 4-hour epic. It's not known for being emotionally devastating.
No, it's simply a recognized masterwork from a director he already admires.
He just calls this one a bit of an oversight. He says he's a confirmed Kurosawa fan. He's seen Seven Samurai, Throne of Blood, The Hidden Fortress. So why the delay with Rashomon?
This is where that idea of cinematic homework really comes in. Rashomon is pivotal, right? It's famous for pioneering that whole narrative device where one event is shown from multiple conflicting points of view.
The Rashomon effect.
Exactly. The structure itself is a classic reference point.
He recognizes its influence. That's why we understand how films like Vantage Point work, or even some TV shows.
So the internal pressure here isn't really about enjoyment necessarily. It's about historical completeness. You feel you have a duty to watch it because of its influence, not necessarily because you're dying to see it tonight. And sometimes the fact that it is this sort of must-see educational piece is exactly what keeps it on the back burner. You opt for something less significant maybe, but more immediately appealing.
It's like putting off reading that foundational historical text because a new fun novel just came out.
Precisely. The cinematic equivalent.
Okay, so that brings us toward the core summary of this deep dive then. The reasons we avoid watching the classics we feel we should see, they're rarely just about the film's quality. It's more about managing our own, psychological bandwidth.
Yeah, we've definitely isolated several powerful barriers here. There's the tyranny of runtime, which is really about the fear of deep commitment.
Right.
There's the anxiety of immense emotional expectation, fearing the emotional output required. There's cultural saturation, where the lore and the quotes kind of replace the need to see the actual narrative.
And that self-imposed pressure of duty viewing, the cinematic homework feel.
Exactly.
And as we mentioned, McArthur's total list goes way beyond these few, right? He included things like Son of Paradiso, The Mission, Cleopatra, The Last Emperor.
And those entire horror franchises, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, it really shows how widespread this avoidance is, even for people who genuinely love movies.
Yeah. And McArthur closes his thoughts with a really interesting point. He notes he watches plenty of new films every year. And many of those new films are actually referencing or, let's be honest, ripping off the very classics that are still sitting on his unseen list. He's consuming the derivatives, but not the original source material.
Which gives us our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. If the documentaries, the historical lore, the endless quotes, and the contemporary ripoffs, if all that satisfies your intellectual curiosity and your social need to know a film,
does knowing about a classic sometimes fully replace the actual need to watch it?
Especially when the alternative is maybe a daunting 4-hour commitment on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, the knowledge of the film becomes a kind of acceptable substitute for the experience of the film.
So what unseen classics are currently sitting on your shelves, maybe gathering dust? Go check them out, if you dare.
That's it for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.